Hey guys, welcome to Cyber Kitty. In this video, we are going to talk about Wherefore Art Thou. This is one of the assignments on Free Code Camp JavaScript algorithms. So basically, what the idea or what's the deal about this function is you get two inputs, and first input is a collection, which is an array of objects. So you got array of objects, and second input is just an object on its own. So what they want us to do is check if all the key value pairs, because the way object works out is you have something like this, a key and a value for it. And it can, like each object can have many more keys and values. So what they want to do is, now that you got a bunch of objects here, they want us to check if this object's key value pairs exist in any of the objects in the given array, and then if they do exist, return that, push it into a new array, and return the new array as a result. So basically, for example, here you have this object and the last name is same in this object. See, it can have other key value pairs. It doesn't matter. As long as all the key value pairs in this object are present in any of the objects in the first array, return those objects, push it into a new array, and return them back. So in this process, we're going to use two methods for objects. First is keys, and the second is has own property. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about this before we do anything else. So how does keys works out? Let's just write and see what happens, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a simple, okay, let's just go with this. I'm going to pick a simple object. Let's just say this is the object that we want to find keys for, right? So return object dot keys. Let's just put that object in there, right? And then when you run it, and as you can, oh, what did it do? Oh, my bad. Object.keys, run it. There we go. So all it does, it returns an array of keys in that object. But when we're talking about, I'm just going to throw it in here. When we're talking about arrays of objects instead, and you actually run it, because at that point, it actually, this method has access to the object, which is an array in this case, and not the direct object inside it. So at which point it actually sends a numeral representation of each element. So that will pretty much be the positions in an array, if positions in an array, if we are doing a key value for an array itself. But that's a little bit about key value. And what does has own property do? Let's go ahead and check that out too. So let's say, for example, we'll call it where sample is equal to this, right? So let's just put that in here. So this is an object. So what we want to do is, let's see how has own property works out. Sample dot has own property. And now let's just do first and then run it. Oh, my bad. There we go. So what's going on is it actually checks if this is a key value, if it is a representation of a key in the object. If it is, it returns true. If it's not, we get a false. So for example, if you write test and then run it, because there's no test here, you actually get a false. So now the next big question is, how are we going to use these two methods to check if all the key value pairs in the second argument are present in any of the objects in the first argument's array, and then return those values. So first thing I want to do is I want to actually save all the key values on the second argument in an array. So let's just call it array1, or we can actually call it key source is equal to object dot keys source. So what this does is actually sends an array of the keys. The reason why I want to do this is because the object can have more than one key value pair. And what they want us to do is actually make sure all the key value pairs that are in the second argument are there before we push that object in the array to a new array as a result. So in any case, if this exists and let's say there's another second argument here that doesn't exist, then that wouldn't work. So that's the reason why we want to make sure first we save all the keys in one spot so we can actually loop through and check if all those exist before we do anything else. Okay, so before I introduce you to the next variable, I'm just going to write a quick for loop because we do want to loop through each object in the array and then check if the object matches up with the condition. So let's go ahead and write up a for loop for simple variable I equal to 0, I less than collection.length I++. So that loops through the the initial collections object. So I'm actually initiating another variable called check. So what I'm using this for is in any case, in this example, let's say we have another variable here, last test sample, right? So in case if this is the case, I want this check variable to do is check initially will be true when we are entering into this. And then what I want to do is once we get to this element, I want to loop through each key in here and check if each key exists in this object. So in here, for example, the last name exists, but if you look for test, it does not. So we don't want this as the result. So at this point, if any of the key value pair does not exist, I want to turn the check to false and then check the variable at the end once we are out of this object and see if this is worth putting it in the result array or not. So for example, now that we are in the main loop, we are, for example, at one object at a time. We are dealing with one object at a time in the array. So at this point, I want to deal with one key value pair at a time from the second argument and compare them. So let's write another loop for j equal to 0, j less than. This is where the keys come in. Because remember, keys is an array of keys in the object. So keys dot length j++. Okay, this point we are already dealing with one object. So let's go ahead and write up an if condition. If first thing we're going to do is does last exist in this object at all? And that's what we want to check first. So we can do that by using has own property. So let's go ahead and write it up. Okay, so collection I, because that represents that particular object in that array, dot has own property keys j, because that's the each key name that we are going through, and then so if that is true, because the good thing with uh, comparative variables is if this turns out false, the system does not even go through the rest of them because false and anything else is always false. So that's the reason why I wanted to check if that exists before we even try and grab that value and compare it. So let's go ahead and now try and compare the values. So collections I and then keys j. So the way we are accessing the object variable, if you see, is collections I, let's say, represents this object here, and then keys j represents last. We're doing is we're going to the first element in the array at this point, and then we are looking at the last, which is keys j's last, so the last value, and that will get us this value right here. So what we're going to do at this point is we're going to check if it is equal to sources value, which is keys Perfect. So we got two things here. We checked if it has a property and then if it is a true. So one more thing I want to do is actually add check. The reason why I'm adding it at the end, at the beginning, is because if the check turns out false, let's say if we looked for last and it doesn't exist in this object, there is no point in even checking the second object, a second key value pair, because we know that pretty much disqualifies this object from being returned as a result. So that's where check comes in. So in any case, let's just say this is the first time iteration, the check is set to true, so it's going to check, hey, so this particular key value pair exists in this object. So I want to keep the check value true. I don't want to change that, and also push the collection object. Oh, not at the moment, my bad. I don't want to do anything at the moment, and then not do or not change any check value. But if this condition is false, then that pretty much disqualifies that object from even existing there, just because there's no point in checking the rest of the key value pairs. What we're going to do at this point is we're going to change the check value to false. That's it. Now, once we looped through this all key value pairs, and somehow we found this one object, it never hit this condition. All the time we were checking for key value pairs, it turned out they exist in one of the objects in the array. So check value still ends up being true. So once we are out of the inner loop, what we do is look for check, and if it is true, then this is where the array push comes in. Then we do array.push, because now we want to keep that object because that object satisfies all the conditions that we want. So collections, collection I, perfect. So in any case, if it is not true, we don't want to do anything because there is no point in it. So let's just quickly run it. Perfect. There we go. So I'm going to give you a quick idea. The reason why we got empty is because I added this test, and test does not exist anywhere. So let's go ahead and quickly check it out. So initially, we saved all the keys in here in an array. And then I made another Boolean variable check to the check. What check does is check is set to true or false depending on what happens every time a key value pair gets compared to a key value pair in the array of objects. And because the condition says all these key value pairs should be present in the object to be returned as a result, in any point, if one of the conditions are not met, or if one of the key value pairs don't exist, we don't want to add that object into the result array. So, which is why by setting check to false, and once we're out of the loop and checking check and then pushing the array, we can ensure that none of the unwanted objects do get pushed into the array by mistake. So that's a little bit about this function here. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you do have any questions or comments, do comment on my video, and if you liked it, do hit that like button. If you want to see more of it, do subscribe to my channel, Cyborg Kitty. Thanks guys, thanks for watching. I will see you on my next video. Until then, have fun coding. Bye.